So friends, in the criminal case of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, the presiding judge, Judge Dale Ho, just issued a 78-page ruling. And Judge Ho not only rejected DOJ's position, but he called out the unethical conduct of some of Donald Trump's DOJ officials. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, we've been waiting for this one. This new court ruling by Federal District Court Judge Dale Ho in the criminal case, the public corruption prosecution of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. You'll recall that Adams was indicted by a grand jury on charges that included bribery and conspiracy and wire fraud, and he was preparing to go to trial, and then Donald Trump was elected. And Donald Trump's dirty DOJ officials tried to dismiss Eric Adams' case temporarily, what's called without prejudice. Why? So they could hang it over Eric Adams' head as leverage, so Adams would be sure to do Donald Trump's political bidding. And they filed a motion with Judge Ho saying, we're going to dismiss this case temporarily without prejudice, but we could bring it back anytime we darn well please. And Judge Ho said, not so fast. And he held some hearings. He had some outside counsel come in and brief up some issues. And today, Judge Ho issued his 78-page ruling, and he said no to Donald Trump's DOJ. You're not going to dismiss it without prejudice. Temporarily, you're going to dismiss it, or I'm going to dismiss it with prejudice, so you can never rebring it, and you can't hold it over the head of Mayor Eric Adams. But in this 78-page ruling, friends, Judge Ho said so much more. He called out the unethical conduct by some of Donald Trump's DOJ officials. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of heavy lifting with me in today's video, because we'll start just briefly with the new reporting as we always do. But I read this 78-page ruling so you don't have to, and I did my best to distill out of it the passages that I think drive home the most important things to know about Judge Ho's ruling. But it's going to take me a few minutes to read through all of those passages, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me. But let's start with the new reporting. This from the AP. Headline, Judge dismisses corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And that article begins, a federal judge dismissed New York City Mayor Eric Adams' corruption case on Wednesday, agreeing it was the only practical outcome while blasting the Justice Department's troubling rationale for wanting the charges thrown out, namely, so the Democrat Adams could help President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. The judge, though, denied prosecutors the option to refile the charges after the mayoral election. Judge Dale Ho's order to dismiss the case with prejudice spares Adams from having to govern in a way that pleases Trump or potentially risk having the Republicans' Justice Department revive the charges. Okay, friends, now let's get right to Judge Ho's 78-page ruling. In the case of United States of America versus Eric Adams, defendant, on February 14, 2025, the Department of Justice filed a motion seeking to dismiss without prejudice, meaning temporarily, the indictment against New York City Mayor Eric Adams pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 48A. DOJ's motion states that dismissal of this case is justified for several reasons, including because continuing these proceedings would interfere with the mayor's ability to govern, thereby threatening federal immigration initiatives and policies. A critical feature of DOJ's motion is that it seeks dismissal without prejudice. That is, DOJ seeks to abandon its prosecutions of Mayor Adams at this time while reserving the right to reinitiate the case in the future. DOJ does not seek to end this case once and for all. Rather, its request, if granted, would leave Mayor Adams under the specter of reindictment at essentially any time and for essentially any reason. The court declines to endorse that outcome. Instead, it dismisses this case with prejudice, meaning that the government may not bring the charges in the indictment against Mayor Adams in the future. In light of DOJ's rationales, dismissing the case without prejudice would create the unavoidable perception that the mayor's freedom depends on his ability to carry out the immigration enforcement policies of the Trump administration, and that he might be more beholden to the demands of the federal government than to the wishes of his own constituents. That appearance is inevitable, and it counsels in favor of dismissal with prejudice. And then, friends, Judge Ho turns his attention to knocking down DOJ's arguments one by one. DOJ's first asserted rationale for dismissing this case, that it has been tainted by appearances of impropriety, is unsupported by any objective evidence. Rather, the record before the court indicates that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York prosecutors who worked on this case followed all appropriate Justice Department guidelines. There is no evidence, zero, that they had any improper motives. And friends, I will hasten to add that the prosecutors who investigated, indicted, and prepared the case for trial, who did nothing wrong and did everything according to DOJ policy, that was in the Joe Biden administration and his Department of Justice. My editorial edition. And DOJ's assertion that this case, which was brought 9 months before the 2025 New York City mayoral primary election, somehow amounts to election interference, lacks any support in Justice Department guidelines or past practice. In fact, the timing of this case is entirely consistent with prior public corruption prosecutions, and friends, here comes the money line. All of this suggests that the appearance of impropriety rationale is not just thin, but pretextual. And friends, I know you know what pretextual means, but I'm going to translate it from judge speak to English. It means that Donald Trump's DOJ, as headed up in this litigation by Emil Bove, lied, offered a pretext, a false reason for doing what he's trying to do here. And that will buy Emil Bove a referral to Bar Counsel, but as we'll discuss at the end, he's already been referred to Bar Counsel several times over for what he did in this case. Judge Ho's ruling continues. As for the immigration enforcement rationale, to the extent the DOJ suggests that Mayor Adams is unable to assist with immigration enforcement while this case is ongoing, such an assertion is similarly unsubstantiated. Indeed, shortly after DOJ made the decision to seek dismissal of the case, and while the indictment was still pending, the mayor announced that he would permit Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to operate at Rikers Island Jail Complex, an act that appears contrary to New York City law. So friends, can I recap that one briefly? After Donald Trump's DOJ filed a motion to dismiss, Eric Adams said, well then, I am going to allow you all, ICE, to do something at Rikers Island that violates New York law. Quid pro quo much? As the judge says, everything here smacks of a bargain. Dismissal of the indictment in exchange for immigration policy concessions. Taking a step back from the particulars of this case, DOJ's immigration enforcement rationale is both unprecedented and breathtaking in its sweep. DOJ cites no examples, and the court is unable to find any, of the government, DOJ, dismissing charges against an elected official because doing so would enable the official to facilitate federal policy goals. Friends, translating that from legalese to English, this is Trump's prosecutors saying, you know what, we're going to make the decision whether to prosecute or not prosecute based on political advantage to Donald Trump. DOJ's assertion that it has virtually unreviewable license to dismiss charges on this basis is disturbing in its breadth, implying that public officials may receive special dispensation if they are compliant with the incumbent administration's, Trump's, policy priorities. That suggestion is fundamentally incompatible with the basic promise of equal justice under the law. So Judge Ho preliminarily announces that he will dismiss with prejudice. It ensures that going forward, the charges in the indictment cannot be used as leverage over Mayor Adams or the city of New York. Okay, friends, just a little bit more. We're going to jump forward from page 4 to page 68. You see, I saved you all a lot of time. Here's how page 68 reads. In sum, the court is left with one rationale from DOJ that is unsubstantiated and appears pretextual, appears to be a lie, the appearance of impropriety rationale, and one that is unprecedented and possibly a quid pro quo arrangement, the immigration enforcement rationale. And friends, regarding this quid pro quo rationale, I'll dismiss your criminal case if you'll help Trump with his political priorities? The judge says, ethics rules prohibit such political considerations in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. DOJ's arguments trigger concerns regarding political favoritism in prosecutorial decision-making. And let's finish up with this, friends. The Constitution created a government dedicated to equal justice under the law, not one in which criminal liability may depend on the defendant's alignment with the policy preferences of the incumbent Trump administration. The breathtaking implications of DOJ's position, which were apparently well known by the numerous attorneys at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and at the Department of Justice, who resigned rather than sign this dirty Rule 48A motion, are difficult to square with the words engraved above the front entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. So friends, this guy, Emile Bove, is the one who orchestrated this dirty dismissal. He directed it. He demanded resignations from other prosecutors when they refused to do it. He gathered together the federal prosecutors at the Public Integrity section in Washington, D.C., and he told them, one of y'all will sign this dismissal motion or else. He, Bove, ended up signing it. He was the one who had to go into court and argue it. And Judge Ho not only ruled against him, but called out his unethical conduct. But friends, even before Judge Ho handed down his 78-page ruling, Emile Bove had had bar complaints filed against him for what he had done in this case, one after another, including complaints filed by New York State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel, by a nonprofit called American Oversight, by Senators Whitehouse and Blumenthal, and others. But now, with the findings of Judge Dale Ho, I have to believe that Emile Bove's fate is sealed before the Bar Council. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.